Hi everyone, this is Michel with Be Luminous, and I am excited to be here with you this afternoon to have a conversation about the 8 limbs and their place in yoga and in our lives. So some of you may be familiar with the 8 limbs as I'm trying to bring in our Ashish to talk with me. And let's see. It's not letting me add him. So Ashish, Arora is going to come and join me to talk about the 8 limbs, and I'm so excited. And here we go. Here he is. Let's see if this works. Ashish, are you here yet? I see you waiting. There you go. Hi.
Hey, Michel. Michel, it might help if you make your phone in. Yeah,
Yep.
there we go.
I didn't realize I had to do that. Hi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Yes, thanks, Preeti. You're right. I needed to turn my camera. So this is Ashish Arora. He is an amazing yoga teacher, software engineer turned yoga teacher. Ashish grew up in India and has lived in the States for quite a long time. And Ashish, I'm excited to talk to you today about the 8 limbs of yoga. I think it's one of those things that people hear about and they think, oh, well, there's this other part, but what is it beyond doing poses and shapes? And I'm excited to just speak with you and hear your thoughts and perspective on what the 8 limbs are, what it was like for you growing up with them as like actually part of your life, and just sort of the background of your knowingness of reality. And then also to talk a little bit about, over the next 15 minutes, how are there some limbs that are really present for you right now that are really working for you in your life, or you're putting them to work in your life? Yeah, so that's kind of the frame of the conversation. You want to give us a little sense of what the 8 limbs are like and what they're
Uh,
about?
the 8 limbs, basically, I mean, like we all are the most familiar one for us, like what yoga is portrayed as the asana practice, of course, and that's a beautiful practice for sure. And that is very prevalent in India. Although I think like more than the asana practice, what I grew up to was the scriptures, which kind of tie into the rest of the like basically the yamas and the niyamas, which kind of are shared across the Vedas. And I mean, there's even actually like more yamas and the Vedas, and so like they go back and forth between that, and that is kind of what like I grew up with to a lot. Like I practiced the physical aspect of the practice growing up a little bit in elementary school, but what was ever present was like being taught about Satya, being taught about Mahatma Gandhi's values, being taught about ahimsa as consequently, and it was like a huge part of growing up on those principles. And
So will
that,
you
yeah,
pause for just a second so
sure.
we translate a few of those? So
Uh-huh.
Satya is
Satya is truth,
truth,
being in,
truthfulness, yeah.
yes,
And
being in discovery
ahimsa.
of truth. Ahimsa is non-violence, being non-violence towards yourself and towards others.
And these are both yamas, and there are yamas within the 8 limbs. And what are the yamas about
The
in
yamas
the 8 limbs?
are about how you live your life towards others primarily, and of course it applies to you as well because till you live it towards yourself, it's impossible to live that way towards others. So yamas is the kind of the guidelines, and like I mean I mean yoga itself isn't religion, but any like spiritual learnings. I think religions evolve from spiritual learnings. Ultimately, is what they become religions. So any spiritual learning you go towards, they will have a certain set of rules they provide, and it's something like which is provided where you don't have to learn it the hard way, where you get it like as part of like I mean as something which is provided to you. So if you follow those guidelines, it makes life a lot easier, and that is what essentially the yamas are.
Hmm. Yeah. So overall, there are how many limbs? There's 8.
Uh-huh. There's eight
And
limbs and
I mean, you know
yamas.
that I know them, but
Yes,
you tell
I
us,
understand.
what
I
are
understand.
they? What are they?
So the 8 limbs are the yamas, which we just talked about. Example, we already talked a couple. There's 5 total. The niyamas is my AirPods keep dropping. I don't know why today, but and so the second limb is the niyamas, and the niyamas are the guidelines, kind of where you how you live your life, like kind of the rules towards. And an example being santosha. Like I mean, you mentioned like what is a limb that has kind of been. I mean, I know right now it's there, but I mean, for me, one of the biggest like limbs which has been present, and I think which is something which is prevalent a lot in India, is santosha, contentment.
Mm,
Contentment not with how you want things to be, like, but contentment with how things are, accepting things how they are. And
mhm.
that is, I feel like I've like what I've grown to a lot, and like seen, and like basically there's so many poverty is so like prevalent in India, and yet there is like even in the poor there's this like, yeah, there's like that guide towards being content with how you are and what you have right now. And that is kind of like I feel it creates, I mean, of course the limbs all tie into each other. They're
Right.
by
Well,
itself, like it's hard to like define them.
do you want
uh,
to
yeah.
do you want to talk about you also mentioned like that Santosha is it was something you grew up with as sort of permeating your culture.
Hmm.
Is is there something about Santosha that's speaking to you right now as
Yeah.
we're in this sort of nebulous in between? It's not quite locked down, it's not quite we're back to the world. Yeah, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. I think as humans, like we have a desire to control things and like to desire to shape things a certain
Mm,
way. And what I mean, and it's that desire is always there, regardless of COVID or not. What has and be, even before COVID, I feel there's always like, I mean, we do not have control. I mean, you cannot like, I mean, like for in living in Seattle, if you've not lived in Seattle ever, like Seattle, it rains a lot. And the biggest thing people talk about in Seattle is the weather and how it sucks. So, and like, I mean, that's where like that's in my yoga teachings, that's what I teach to a lot is you cannot control the weather. I mean, either you take an action towards it, like where you say, okay, I'm not going to live here. This is just completely not my thing. Or you say, I'm going to accept it. The more you fight it in your head, the harder life gets for you. So that acceptance towards what is, like the weather will be, it will be raining 9 months of the year. And then the more you can accept it, the more you are going to move towards contentment, santosha. And now what COVID has done is it's like turned everything upside down, where now we are all in that same phase. We are all like, even though it's different situations, like some of us have more than others, and so it's or less. So it's just like it is different, and yet there is like we're all in the same phase of life where, yeah, there's lockdowns, and some of the things we're facing are the same at the same time. And what it has drawn us towards is like, yeah, I mean, we want to control. We're like, oh, when are things going to open? When are they not? I mean, or how many people are wearing masks, what people are not wearing masks, the judgment it draws towards. So, like that practice of ahimsa gets huge, non-violence, non-judgment, the practice of santosha, being content with what you have right now. And even a sense of gratitude. Like with santosha comes a sense of gratitude, gratitude for what is,
mhm,
rather than like a quest for what isn't. So,
mhm, mhm.
so that's what
Yeah, there no, there's
that's what I grew up with.
so many
Yeah.
places we could go with that and follow up with that. I
Mm-hmm.
think though today to stay a little bit broad. So we talked about the yamas and the niyamas a little bit, that the niyamas are this other set of five, and Santosha is one of those. So
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the other limbs? And is there anything standing out is there anything else standing out? Yeah, just want to give us a rundown of the limbs real fast, and then we'll loop back
Sure.
to some more meat.
Sounds good. Yeah. So the third limb is the asana practice, which it's like the limbs, the where do the eight limbs come from? Like just to give
Mhm.
it some context, is the eight limbs come from the Yoga Sutras, written by Patanjali or defined by Patanjali, however you want to say it. And it's kind of what's formed the guideline to the yoga practice, which is the most common in the West. And like I mean there's more forms of yoga defined, like I mean talked about to a good degree by the Bhagavad Gita, and yet like the yoga we practice primarily, it's called Raja Yoga, Dhyan Yoga. There's multiple names depending on how you want to treat it, but the asana practice is a big part of the Raja Yoga. And yet the sutras don't put too much time on that. I mean, it's something which is kind of like left out in the open, and that's where there's been so much discussion around that. But I won't get too deep into that. So the next limb is the pranayam, which is you controlling your breath, controlling prana, the life force. Like your breath is your life force, and you're controlling the intake, outtake. Which, like, I mean, if you think about it, like if you are like the moment, like you are tense, you'll notice your breath gets like a lot pacier, your heart rate starts to go up, and so, and the more you can slow down your breath, the more you can get in control of your body, of your mind. And so like again, the pranayama practice is thought of more. A lot of people, when they think of pranayama practice, they think of like doing something like closing a nostril or doing something, but that's just a form of pranayama. So there's like
Well,
pranayama. Yes,
yeah.
sorry.
I mean,
Yeah.
no, as she even as the first time you said, oh yeah, pranayama, and you said breath, I noticed I took a deep breath. And those of you who are here with us live right now, like you might just take a deep breath. Because that's actually, right, bringing us closer to the practice of yoga than anything we could do.
Yes. And in
Yeah,
fact, like
it's just a lovely reminder.
yes, and since we are on the topic, I think like you asked, like in the last 1 year, what limb has shown up? Like, I mean, the yamas have shown up a lot for me, the asana practice as well. But I think the biggest thing which has helped is, as you said, like just taking that breath. It's just like because there's so much news around, like so much like injustice, shootings right now, so much like of what has happened in the last year with COVID. I mean, I'm listening to the news on India right now. If you're not aware, it is terrible out there right now. They're running out of oxygen in hospitals. And it just is like, and the poor are the one who suffer the most, of course, and but everyone is suffering there. And so it just like listening to news like that, I just got off of that, and like my thought was like, should I ask Michael to like do this another time? Because I was literally in tears like about 20 minutes back. And then what helped was taking a few breaths. Like I sat down, I took a few breaths, and then again, that coming back to, yeah, I cannot do something about that. And it is the eight limbs which guide me to still move away from suffering, rather than, I mean, feeling that suffering, feeling other people suffering, feeling that sadness, being with it, and yet being able to move on from it. So that is,
Yeah,
yeah.
it almost sounds like Ashish, is it like it sounds like you're articulating this capacity to hold what is difficult, and it doesn't just take you into it, take you out, because you are able to use the eight limbs, the
Hmm.
tools, the breath to support you even as you can hold this difficult thing. Does that seem like that's what you're speaking to?
Yes, and I just took a deep breath, right, as you said
Is
that.
that just
So
awesome?
yeah.
Like we're doing it. We're doing it. I hope
Yes.
any of you who are here with us, like you're doing it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's why it's a practice. Like the more you practice it, the more easily it comes. And then like the more, like, I mean, I don't even have to try to control it. But I don't I mean, it becomes like right now in my life, like it's become kind of an automatic, like where it was like the elections and all, so much going on. It just, I mean, I wouldn't even notice. And my wife would, Shapali, she would point me out saying, "Oh, you just took a deep breath." And just, it just comes, and it just like, and it changes how I feel inside. So it changes like how I can like calm myself down. So
Well,
and
that's
see
really
it.
interesting. We'll do another conversation here where
Yeah.
we're talking about the actual physiology of breath, because there's a lot of really cool information around that. For
Hmm.
now, okay, so Ashish, you've been really using Santosha and pranayama, just a deep breath, even not like a
Hmm.
fancy pranayama practice, to support you this year. And then there's these other remaining limbs that we haven't identified yet: pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, and samadhi.
Hmm.
And I wonder if there's anything in there. So pratyahara, do you want to just define them real quick and then
Sure.
see if there's anything in there to speak to?
Yeah, so the last four limbs, like I mean, the first two limbs talk about how to live life, towards yourself, towards others, primarily. I mean, the next two are asana and pranayam, which we in the West, like that's what we think of yoga when we think of yoga, primarily. The last four are all like moving more towards meditation, where they primarily talk in one form or another about meditation and the practice of meditation. And so, and it could be a moving meditation, it could be a still meditation. So the fifth limb, pratyahara, is about drawing in your senses, because our senses run wild. And I mean, just like, so drawing in those senses to kind of focus on the internal. And like one example I can give you is like anytime you see people like wine tasters and stuff, like you'll see them like close their eyes And really, like the moment you close one sense, the sense of taste gets highlighted. So it's just like, I mean, so the more senses you close, the senses you leave open, if you close your eyes, all of a sudden you'll hear a lot more. So it just like that gets highlighted. So that's the practice of
Mm-hmm.
pratyahara, pulling in the senses, either drawing attention internally, like to yourself, and or to like the senses which you leave open getting highlighted. In the interest of running short on time, moving on to the sixth limb of dharana is you setting that intention towards meditation, to intention towards quieten, setting that intention, taking a step towards it. Dharana, like taking on, dharan literally is like you taking on a form. So taking on that form towards meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And dhyan is like in India, like, oh, my AirPod dropped again there. So dhyan is like you, and the more commonly used word is like, yeah, focus. And yet dhyan is much bigger than just focus. It is, again, it is, dhyan itself is what we define as meditation. It's just a
Mm-hmm.
state where we're trying to focus, get present to a certain thing, to either to a mantra or to your breath, to kind of like let go of everything else, like kind of building on top of the pratyahara, the dharana. And the last limb is samadhi, which, I mean, samadhi is treated different ways, different forms of yoga. There's like a question about duality, non-duality. But to keep it simple, samadhi is that state which you achieve. And some believe it's a state you get to once, but I don't believe that. I believe like, no, it's a state you get to and you get out of, and it's a state of oneness. Oneness,
Mm-hmm.
not just with yourself, but like with your surroundings, with your with everyone near you, around you, with nature. So your oneness with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Not one that I think we feel like we spend that much time in. Like it's
Yes.
lovely when it occurs, right? And it's
Yes.
yeah. And yet, like I was just thinking as you were describing pratyahara, the power of pratyahara in a world that is thick with all the strife that you were speaking about, the
Hmm.
naming and identifying earlier. And this that pratyahara is actually one I've been working with, I feel like, a lot this
Mm.
year. And not in a like blinders on, I don't know what's happening in the world. I'm intentional about how I engage with news. I'm intentional about the spaces that I do that. And then I'm also intentional about maybe completing that with a pranayama practice or something that it's not like I let that just sit in my nervous system.
Hmm.
Or perhaps I know another way that I've been working with this is maybe reading the news and then meditating, which I think in the past I would have not recommended people do. And yet I'm finding that right now it's a way to help it be almost metabolized,
Hmm. I
so
totally
that
get
it's
that. Yeah.
not just sitting here overwhelming me. Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. Is there anything else you feel like, yeah, we're almost out of time. And yet, is there anything else you want to say around the eight limbs and their applicability right now?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I mean, the last few years, and especially it's shown up a lot in the last year because, like, I've seen so much suffering around, and yet, like, if you, I mean, ask me, like, I've had a very like calm year. I mean, so it's like I'm a very like social person. For those who know me, I'm like very outgoing. I love being with people. I was teaching like 15 to 20 yoga classes before
And he
COVID.
hugs. He gives really good hugs.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I was like teaching 15 to 20 classes all over Seattle. So I was like out all the time, out with people all the time. And if you told me like, no, I had to pull out from that, I would have revolted. I was like, no, I love this. And I mean, I don't know how I'll be if I give up on this. And yet, like the moment the lockdown started, I was like, yeah, this is fine. I was like, yeah, I'm getting time to be with family. I've like so that transition was so much easier because of the eight limbs, because of being in that practice of like, no, I mean, I cannot control what is going on outside. I
Mm-hmm.
cannot change it. And it's not just like the practice of santosha, and there's like ahimsa, non-violence, both towards myself, my family, towards other people. So it's just like it's hard to put like one limb onto it. It's just like I mean, it's just everything. The asana practice helped me a lot, even being at home. So just it was a combination, and yet like I had a really like, I hate to say it because people have gone through so much, and I've cried a lot for those people. I've cried, I felt that too, and I've held that. And yet, like it has, if I had to say, put a word to my year, I would say it's been a wonderful year. So it's just, despite the
Mhm.
fact that I am an out and out extrovert and I mean, I haven't really met almost anyone like in the last year, and yet, like I find a lot of energy, a lot of like calm and satisfaction where I'm at. So, and a lot of it, I mean, some of it, of course, I have a gratitude towards, like, I mean, being in a space where I have been able to practice it,
Mhm.
because a lot of people don't have that control.
Well,
And
I
yet,
would,
like, yeah.
yeah, Ashish, I would say like moving, so, we're moving forward and things are starting to shift in a new way
Mm-hmm.
and opening up, and yet it's a tentative opening up, right? Like we get a toe in the water and then sometimes we have to take the toe out and we put a foot in the water. And as we're moving forward, is there anything you would offer people? I mean, I'm hearing you say that it's like taking on a practice, like a daily practice of studying and being in the eight limbs is they all feed each other and they're helpful in a real modern context.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, is there anything else you would want to say to that as people are imagining, what would I do moving forward to make this real in my life?
Yeah, I think like the biggest thing is to not fight things. I mean, let go of some of the resistance. I feel like one of the biggest things is like, especially like moving the way we are moving, where some things open up, then they close, they open up, they close. So there's a lot of resistance every time there's a big change. I mean, even a small change we resist. When it's changed, like the big changes we're seeing, there's so much resistance, and then the
Mm-hmm.
more resistance we are creating in our head, the harder it is for us to move on. We're in that phase of complaining, is like, oh, why is this going on? And that's, I feel, is a good space to kind of notice, like, what do you, I mean, being in that practice of self-study, like self-swadhyaya from the second limb, like being in study of like, okay, where are you complaining a lot? And like, is it draining your energy? And
Actually,
yeah.
yeah, that's such a great real life thing. When I notice I'm complaining, I've learned that my complaint is teaching me, telling me something.
Mm-hmm.
And is there something for me to let go of? Is there a request to be made? Is there a truth to be told? Something, right? Like a
Yes.
complaint is a great indicator
Mm-hmm.
that there's something else to be done. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I love that. And especially as we move forward, because I think complaints are popping up. Yeah, I hear that.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Ashish, thanks for joining me. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us. We are launching Mindful Reentry program at Be Luminous Yoga, where we'll be actually incorporating a lot of what Ashish and I have just been talking about. And then Ashish is one of the awesome teachers who joins us in the Be Luminous 200-hour yoga teacher training, which starts in August. And early bird applications are being accepted now. So check it out if you're interested. And Ashish, thank you so much. We have a few more of these we can do. So I would love to keep chatting because this is really fun.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you, Michael, for the
And thank you
opportunity.
to everyone who's stuck around with us. It's nice to see you, Brandon and Jess and Michelle. Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.